You know, I'm not usually into the Wild West or cowboys, it's not really my aesthetic, but when I caught the trailers for Evil West, a game where you take control of a super-powered cowboy with an arsenal of firearms and melee moves, I was more than interested. And then I also saw that the game was going to feature a completely cooperative campaign, and after hearing that, I was pretty much sold and asked my best friend Nick if he'd want to go through the whole game with me. There were things we laughed at, things we screamed at, and things we cheered at, so if you'd like to know what this game has got in store for you and potentially a friend, you've come to the right channel. This is Evil West. Jesse Rentier, or Rentier depending on who's talking, is the heir to the Rentier estate in the budding Western America. The Rentier clan have made a name for themselves as the most successful vampire hunters around, devising several contraptions that make whoopin' demon ass possible. Their greatest tool is easily the Rentier Gauntlet, a mechanical fist decked out with reinforced bars of steel, claws, and a healthy supply of weaponized electricity. As you could imagine, the success of Jesse's family has made them the enemy for many big names in the underworld, and this comes back to haunt them as a high-ranking vampire named Peter DeBano sicks his daughter Felicity on the Institute during a demonstration of the Gauntlet's capabilities, killing most of the attendees and infecting Jesse's dad with vampirism. So the clock is ticking to save Jesse's father as well as push back the vampire's imminent invasion of America. On the occasion, Jesse runs into Felicity and sees firsthand that she's not your typical vampire, but eventually Jesse puts an end to DeBano and Felicity through some pretty standard means of beating the hell out of them. The day is saved and America's future looks bright. The narrative itself is extremely basic. There's no real twists or turns that made me grip my seat in excitement. Everything plays out exactly how we thought it was going to, but that didn't take away from how hilariously schlocky this dialogue is. Jesse Rentier, God bless him, has got to be one of the biggest goobers I have ever had the pleasure of controlling in a game.
Of course it's not working.
Luckily,
He's
you
such
have
a
a full
bonehead.
sidekick who can...
There were just so many moments that we couldn't help but laugh at because of either his attitude or his hopelessly stupid dialogue.
Got it. I'll clear the way. You take care of finding the central reservoir thingy.
I eat this kind of stuff up. There are a few side characters that were pretty memorable but don't really have much to do with the overall plot. Edgar was pretty entertaining for a few lines.
Harold can suck my fat Yeah, exactly.
Virgil, who I can't help but think is a Devil May Cry reference, fills the quota of the nerdy, scared scientist. Dr. Blackwell is this no-nonsense woman who's okay. Don't remember too much from her, honestly, but easily the best character is James Harrow.
Who do I have to bend over this bar and indiscreetly to get some?
America's Assistant Secretary of War, only in it for his own game and the biggest potty mouth of the whole cast.
We're having dinner after a sweet-ass musical premiere none of you were invited to because you don't matter!
Jesus. He never disappointed when he was on screen. The entire time we were playing, Evil West gave off the feeling that it wouldn't have been out of place in the early Xbox 360 era of games. It's a completely new IP, it was hopelessly corny, the action was over the top, and the gameplay was fun as hell, but ultimately flawed. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Each level sees you exploring these unique linear environments looking for hidden bags of money for upgrades, some limited cosmetics, or perks to bolster Jesse's abilities. Exploration isn't anything too crazy, you'll mostly only find small deviations in the levels that hide these things. And puzzles aren't really part of the equation unless you count the 1 or 2 times you'll need to push around a train car to get up to a higher ledge. The one exception to this rule though is the level A Man of People. This level has 3 objectives spread to different corners of an open map. And the best aspects of this level are the things in between these objectives. There are several houses and secluded walkways that hide so many little treasures that exploring this place was some of the most fun that we had. Not to mention, Nick and I were free to explore the entire level independently of each other if we wanted. It's a shame that this level was the exception rather than the rule. The other levels are rather linear, but that's not really a deal breaker seeing as how the best thing about Evil West by a country mile is the combat. Evil West is a third-person melee action game that mixes in a few ranged options to spice things up. The Rentier Gauntlet allows Jesse to land a string of basic melee attacks by tapping the R1 button, and when held down, this will initiate a launcher. From here we have a few fun options. Jesse's trusty revolver can keep enemies airborne while also just being a good ranged option in general. Jesse can follow up a launch with a punch back down to the ground, or he can use the zapper to slam them for some splash damage. The zapper is where the bulk of Jesse's real utility starts to come out. By pressing L1, a barrier will appear in front of Jesse for a short time. This can block incoming damage from larger enemy attacks if timed correctly, and it can leave weakened or smaller enemies stunned. Pressing the Y or triangle button will send out a shockwave that stuns every enemy in the arena. By using the zapper and pushing forward, you'll zip in a straight line towards an enemy. This is incredible for moving across the battlefield in the blink of an eye, and conversely, if you use the zapper and hold back, you can pull small enemies towards Jesse. And getting enemies closer to you is a great time to use the boomstick. A close range blast of lead that's perfect for interrupting enemies and one of Jesse's many ranged options. We've already mentioned the revolver, but Jesse gains access to a repeater rifle and a crossbow for long range combat. A flamethrower, which is great for throwing a wet blanket over enemies, high-tech dynamite sticks that pack a huge punch, and a Gatling gun that is amazing when you have it, but it doesn't fill up fast enough for it to be terribly reliable. And that's pretty much it. This is an amazingly robust moveset, and it's a great set of tools to work with. But the thing that really makes this combat system work for me is the amount of variety and moves the enemies throw at you. Enemies will throw several hard-hitting attacks at the player, but the strongest ones can typically be countered if you use the right action. The first of the two major counters are these golden circles that will show up on enemies as they're doing certain moves. Some circles appear for longer than others, but the goal for this is always to shoot the target area with the repeater or the crossbow. This will break them out of whatever attack they're doing and leave them open for a follow-up. The other big counter opportunities are for when the enemy flashes this golden color. By clicking the right stick, Jesse will shove his boot into them and leave them stunned. Every enemy uses one or both of these moves, and they're infinitely satisfying to shut down. When you're facing off against a really strong enemy like these bat dudes, and you're putting them through their paces by countering and blocking everything they throw at you, it's an exhilarating feeling. It honestly rivals the kind of zen state I feel when fighting some of Sekiro's enemies. The counter maneuvers aren't quite as complex as the ones in Sekiro, but it still feels amazing. And on top of that, all of the other enemies that need special attention as well. These basic demons create small poisonous creatures that can be really disruptive if left alone, but if you stay calm and line the creatures in front of the one who's making them up, you can zip through them all and take care of the creator in one swift action. These egg sack guys will fly around the arena and cover the enemies with these corrosive bugs. Melee attacks will cause damage to the player if they attempt to hit them, but we later figured out that using the counter kick will knock the effect off of them. These flying bugs can be very annoying, but they're easily dispatched if you just use the zapper to pull them in. The variety of enemies don't stop there either. There were so many that would be introduced as bosses, and we would get absolutely wrecked by them. But then in the next level, there would be 2 of them thrown at us, plus some extra enemies, and we would roast them on our first try. Like I said, all of the enemies have the pinpoint reticle and the glowing moves, so there's an impressive amount of counter opportunities to watch out for in these fights. The variety of the cast and the design of each combat encounter constantly makes it worthwhile, and I think this was probably the first game where I appreciated mob enemies showing up in boss fights. I may or may not have forced Nick to play on the hard difficulty because, you know, I'm a sadist, and these boss fights can get tough, meaning our health was in a constant state of flux. It relieved us when smaller enemies came out because they would often drop health pickups. They usually appeared when the boss would go away to cool off or summon a long-ranged attack that we had to dodge. The only enemy type that I think we could agree we didn't like having to deal with were these shielded demons. They weren't impossible to beat, but they undoubtedly interrupted the flow of every fight they were in. Their shields took so much damage before they were destroyed, and then you could start hurting them again. The grenades made short work of them when they were off cooldown, but a lot of the times they weren't, and we had to do it by hand. Not to mention the grenade is picked up towards the end of the game, and the shield enemies are encountered far before that. But easily, the worst aspect of these guys is their shield projectile. They can send these shields along the ground, and they're very annoying to get around. It was frustrating everywhere, but it was especially frustrating when one of us was trying to get the other one off the ground. I lost count of how many times that move completely blindsided us. This one section that made us fight one of them in a very small arena made us lose our minds just a little bit. Ass in my penis! We had less trouble with 3 of these bat enemies than we did with this stupid encounter with a bunch of schmoes. Oh, are you kidding me? We kinda get into God of War territory with how the camera is set up here. Evil West utilizes the same radial damage indicator, but it's not nearly as frustrating due to the focus on range combat and the glorious addition of an FOV slider thanks to the 1.4 patch. It gave us a way better view of the battlefield and what the enemies were doing at all times. I did feel a pretty strong God of War influence on this title though, just saying. I would be remiss to not mention how much better playing the entire game with a friend makes the experience though. The enemies and bosses obviously have their attention divided between 2 players now instead of 1, making for more freedom to pursue fun combos or just take a break. But easily, the thing that this game does right above anything else is how its co-op feels. Not only can you and your friend make combos together with both of you being able to add onto each other's combos, but progression is generous too. If one player finds a bag of money or shoots down a cowboy for some treasure, both players will get the same amount of money. And it's not shared either. Both players will have the same amount of resources to upgrade their own character with, leaving player 1 to focus on their own aspects of Jesse's arsenal while player 2 focuses on what they like. It's perfect for building a dream duo. I ended up really liking the Gatling gun's vaporizing power and the crossbow's speed. Meanwhile, Nick focused on the precision of the repeater and making his grenades as deadly as possible. The way the game handles combat and progression is perfect, but there are a few things that are less than ideal for the co-op crowd. There are 2 minecart sections that only the main player can participate in. It's not a real big issue, it's just a little boring for player 2 to be forced to watch this honestly boring little distraction instead of doing something fun. And then there were the technical issues. We dealt with some weird desync at times, Nick had several core abilities like his zapper disabled during tough encounters, and I had several instances where I swear one of the upgrades you can unlock didn't work as it was described. So Jesse has a small healing ability that goes on cooldown after use, but the first upgrade you can unlock for it is a 5-second window of invulnerability after you use it. And I got some mileage out of it, only sometimes though. There were just certain attacks that ignored the invulnerability and would still hurt me even after activating the ability. These instances were far less frequent towards the beginning of the game, but as we neared the last few levels, we experienced some awful technical issues. There was a point in the level Lightning in a Bottle where going into the menus would cause the game to become wildly unstable and eventually crash or freeze on both sides. We reloaded the checkpoint several times, but like clockwork, as soon as one of us went to tinker with our upgrades, the game started crapping out. And the worst of it was the second to last level, the heist. After making it to the last obstacle of the level, the game decided to crash, so we decided to take a break. The game had been wonderful about checkpoints up until now, putting us right where we left off after coming back to it. But trying to reload this particular checkpoint was impossible for some reason. We waited, tried and tried again, even letting it load for a good chunk of time before giving up and just restarting the level and not stopping until we finished it. The little bugs like watching the second player's model freeze when doing context-sensitive animations get a laugh out of me and don't hurt anything, but these bugs that force us to play without our upgrades or restart an already challenging level completely kill our fun. We were having an absolute blast up until the last few levels when it became more unstable. But when I look past all of those technical issues, I can't help but like this game a lot. The story is the corniest corn you could ever shuck, but Lord have mercy, it made us laugh the whole time. The combat has only a few issues as far as the balancing goes, and the rest of my problems can be easily ironed out with patches and updates. And once that's all clear, I think this will be one of the most satisfying co-op action games I've ever played. With lightning fast counter maneuvers and a large array of flashy super moves, Evil West is an easy recommend for me if you and a friend want a good time. If this series is to continue and we get a sequel, I would love to see multiple playable characters as well. While it wasn't the end of the world for both of us to play as Jesse...
Get your head out of your ass, Jesse.
Sorry, Jesse, I'm coming. Damn it. It would have been so easy to let the player 2 take control of Edgar. He's almost always by Jesse's side anyway, and it would have made for more customization options. I'm sure the team just ran out of time, but I would love to see more cosmetic customization for co-op should we get an Evil West 2. Which I would personally love to see, by the way. I could see some of these fights maybe getting a little repetitive if you're going solo, but the combat is good enough to keep you going through if you put the work in. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.